All right, everyone. Welcome to the Drive Home live stream. This is Friday, January 27th. This has been a bit of a wild week, and I'm still getting used to the idea of trying to maintain a monologue while also driving home safely. So we're going to leave ourselves a little grab bag of topics so that as I need to, I can shuffle, switch around since I have to multitask. So let's start by continuing the conversation that I was having a little bit this morning with took a wrong turn. This is starting out awesome. I'm running an errand after work, and so I'm taking an unfamiliar route. Anyway, talking a little bit about modern media. There's, in a certain sense, we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to modern media. We have more creative output, more options, more channels, more flexibility over what we can watch and listen to, more customizability, more personalization. I mean, I'm not that old. I'm 41. And I can remember vividly growing up, driving across the country and feeling like on a road trip and feeling like uh, it was kind of awful to only have AM radio. Maybe if we were near a major city, we would tune into FM radio and scan through the channels and hope to luck our way into some song that we recognized, maybe from the radio. I mean, who knew? It was a complete grab bag. That was 30 years ago. That was barely a blink. And now we live in a world where not only do we have live streams and podcasts and of course, all the radio, all the music you could ever want on MP3 as a playlist on a personalized computer that you keep in your pocket with a pair of headphones that you can toss in and just listen to. I mean, it's perfect. It's exquisite. But then you can add on to the fact of that professionally produced audiobooks. You can add on to that, I mean, movies. You can stream Netflix or Hulu or whatever right to your phone. Or, as my family does, you even have the ability to rip movies that you own and turn them into a media server that you stream from your own computer. So we have videos that we own the copyright to that we can turn on for our kids or stream to an iPad, anything we need to. It's stunning just how far technology has come. So then my question is, as I look at that and I think, okay, that's awesome. But the downside is most of it is terrible. And let me quantify terrible. You can have products that you spend a lot of money on. You can have products that talented people work on. You can have products that come from world-class source material. And you can still end up telling a terrible story. Still end up leaving your audience resentful or even downright enraged. One of the things that I pay attention to as I watch on YouTube primarily, and I see how there is a flood of, I think the term is hate watching. I may not be too old, but I'm old enough. I'm not up on all the lingo. There's a flood of people that basically make money on their channel by in detail picking apart mainstream media and shouting about it, getting enraged. And this is not like a film critique. This is not a matter of, well, in my opinion, you could have done this better. This is a visceral, emotional response. And these channels are very productive. They're very effective in the marketplace. They get a lot of response. They get a lot of traction. And probably part of that is it bleeds, it leads. Probably part of that is a certain cynicism in the consumer space. But it does make me ponder and wonder, one, why make so much garbage? And two, why spend all your time pointing and saying, hey, look, this is garbage? It doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't take you anywhere that you want to go. So when I look at it, I apologize, I'm trying to figure out where to turn to get on the freeway. I think I see it. It accomplishes nothing. And it's not, if I look at it critically, it's not rational. It is, as I said, it's a visceral response. It's a venting of your spleen. So if we try and dig into why that is, one reason is it is offensive to take something that is treasured and run it through the mud. And we talked a little bit this morning about why modern retelling of famous source material is typically not great, for to put it mildly. So the short version of that is, if you are not writing in order to faithfully recreate what the author already did, but instead you are writing with the intent to tell your own story, to put your own spin on it, and your spin comes from a subjective, equity-minded approach, then it forces you to warp the story to fit your narrative, and in so warping the story, you rob it of any emotional resonance that it once had with the audience. And it may have the same names, it may look the same, it may have the same places or the same characters, but it is a surface level resemblance only, and there's no joy there, there's no substance, there's no heart, and that is offensive. I mean, that's in a certain way the proper response is to call that out and shout about it, but it doesn't accomplish anything. And one of the reasons for that is because the creative spaces have long been dominated by leftist ideology. And in order for that to make sense, I suppose we have to unpack that a little bit, because particularly in American political conversation, it is really easy. Let me flip that on its head. It is incredibly difficult to use accurate terms in the American political commentary space, partly because accurate terms are exactly what sneaky people want to avoid. So let me see if I can articulate this in a way that makes sense. If you accept polling as at least an indicator of what's going on, then one of the things that polls find over and over and over again is that there are more conservatives than more right-leaning. America's more right-leaning than left-leaning. America's more conservative than liberal, just from a sheer numbers basis. And one of the things that follows on from that, if we're looking at this critically, is if you want to pursue a leftist agenda, you have to cloak it in something else, or else it won't be popular. So if you outright say, one of the few times that President Obama got himself in a lot of trouble, if you outright say, I don't just want to go after bad guys or crazy people, but I want to actually take guns away from the average American citizen en masse, that is incredibly unpopular. If you actually say, instead of saying I'm pro-choice, you say you have the freedom to murder a child up to, including, and beyond the point of birth. If you look at the interview with Ralph Northam a few years ago, where he discussed that it was within the realm of his consideration that even if a baby had been born, there was still the option on the table for the mother and the doctors to sit down and decide, we need to end that baby's life. That is an example of a leftist ideology, and there's some reasons for that ideology we can get into in another video. But it's an example of why there is a desire within certain parts of the political spectrum to obscure, to obfuscate what they're doing. One of the easiest ways to do that is to control the language. This started in earnest in the 90s. I remember growing up, so I was born in 81. I remember growing up and being flummoxed by the rise of the idea of political correctness. Now, I didn't know it at the time. I've learned it since in my own study, but the idea of a statement or language or word choice being politically correct is an overtly communist phenomenon. Communism is famous for controlling language, controlling speech. It's a method of controlling thought. If you control the words that a society uses, you can shape the way society thinks about the world. It's freaky, it's real. And so in order to create their desired political reality, they would have people say things that may not be factually correct, but were politically correct. And it was a way of kind of willing that into existence, shaping people's minds to think correctly from a political lens. Because communism is universalist, everything goes through that political lens. Now, let's go back to where we started in this conversation, which is commentary and discussion in the American political system. As an example, if you go back to the early 1900s, you would see that the word liberal doesn't mean what it means today. A classic or classical liberal is someone who, by and large, believes in individual autonomy, believes in freedom of creation and expression, believes in a society that is virtuous and a protection and promulgation of that virtuousness. And that's a wonderful thing. I would say of all the different labels out there, classical liberal is probably the thing that lines up with my brain the best, if you wanted to try and put a label on it. But leftists, let's just call it Woodrow Wilson, to put not to find a point on it, there were some people that wanted to progress the culture, that wanted to do what the communists were doing, but in a gentle, gradual way. We talked about growth the other day, how sometimes growth is gradually and then suddenly. And the communists believed in revolution, and the progressive movement, particularly in America, but also in Europe, believed in the same end goal, but wanted to get there gradually, wanted to ease people into the boiling water. The challenge is, at some point, it has to go from gradual to sudden. It remains to be seen if and when that's going to be attempted in our lifetimes. It certainly has been going gradually for quite some time. So, because of that, there was a concerted effort to change the labels that surrounded certain movements and certain factions within American politics. So, leftists took on the word liberal to describe themselves because that word pulled well. That word had denoted things that people agreed with. Well, that's fine until people started to realize what they were actually being tricked into, and then that tarnishes that word, and so the left generally is the one that uses language to accomplish its means, moves on to a different word. This is the reason why critical race theory, while dangerous, is also likely going to be almost impossible to eradicate. And the reason why is because you can write a piece of legislation that says you can't teach critical race theory in public schools. Look at Ron DeSantis in Florida. An admirable effort. But does it really change anything if the people who believe in those principles just relabel it, repackage it, and publish it again? Now, instead of teaching critical race theory, you call it racial destiny, social destiny, whatever. But they're masters at marketing. they'll come up with another label, but the principle is the same. That's why we have to oppose based on principle, not just on label. So, circling all of those meandering points back to the beginning, in order to have a frame of reference for talking about the way political ideology impacts our culture, which is what I'm trying to do with this channel, and in particular with these videos that are discussing modern movie making, modern television, modern storytelling. The challenge is, if you and I can't agree on a label, then I say something and you hear something different. The idea is, if we're both watching the same movie, but we see totally different things, or if we're both witnessing the same event, but we both take different meanings from it. We have the same observation, but we draw different conclusions. So, when I say leftist ideology, broadly speaking, what I mean is that there are people in the world who believe, they have a core set of beliefs they all tend to hold more or less together. And that core set of beliefs could be summarized as, they believe that man is imperfect, that the rule of life and existence is suffering and death, that man is perfectible, that the actual nature of man can be changed, typically through political will, through education, through mortal means. They tend to deny the existence of God, supplanting that with the idea that government can do the function that other people ascribe to God, which is to redeem man and change his nature. Because they believe this, they believe it is a moral virtue, it is a moral right to use the power of government to try and change human nature in order to achieve utopia. And for them, they describe utopia as equality of outcome, from each according to their ability to each according to their needs. Everyone puts in everything they have, and everyone receives in return everything they need. All needs are met, pain is obviated, despair and poverty is eliminated, and the world is a safe and equitable place. I'm not saying this is a description of reality. I'm saying this is their belief set. The reason why I phrase it in this way is because you notice I'm not making anybody a bad guy. Everyone believes they're the hero of their own story. Everyone has found a way to put their actions and motivations and belief within a moral framework that makes them feel good about it. Or they're a sociopath. That's pretty much the two options. So, when you talk to someone who is espousing a leftist ideology, they don't think they're evil. They actually think what they're doing is moral and right and virtuous. And they will sometimes use those terms, use that language. I mean, think about the phrasing that we've heard over the last 10, 20 years. Social justice warriors. All three of those words are great. Social, everybody together. Justice, everything is equal. Warrior, look at me, I'm brave and I'm fighting for justice. They've framed what they're doing in a way to make themselves feel morally virtuous. Because if they can't feel that way, if they can't convince themselves that what they're doing is moral and right, then they'll fall away from their cause. They'll seek for another cause. They'll realize that what they're doing is wrong. And it is a very rare person who sees what they're doing, knows that it's wrong, and says, I'm going to do it anyway for X, Y, and Z reason. Those people exist, but they are the exception rather than the rule. So when I describe leftists or leftist ideology, that's my preferred term as a catch-all term for people who generally group their beliefs along that vein. Whether or not they ascribe those motivations to themselves. And I say this very carefully because I have family members that have put themselves in that camp. And I love them. I think that they probably haven't thought things all the way through, or else they've decided to allow one particular concern to trump any other concerns. Or who knows, maybe something else. I don't think I'm related to any sociopaths, but I suppose it's possible. So that's my catch-all term. Now, on the right, again, as a general way of describing a catch-all bucket for people on the other side, I describe people who are more individualistic, who tend to be a little more reserved, who tend to be a little more closed off to new experience, who tend to value tradition and value things that are right, even if they are unpopular or boring. Again, trying to find a way to frame their own efforts so that they can feel that they are morally right and justified. So, we're going to get into that a little more, I'm sure, as we go along. But basically, you're looking at left and right. And if you really want to distill the whole thing down, Jordan Peterson does a wonderful job of laying this out, but the simple truth of it is you can either have equality of opportunity in a society, or you can have equality of outcome in a society. You can never have both. The more you increase of one, the less you'll have of the other. And these are two things that are fundamental values, and they are irreconcilable. If I give everyone, if I put 200 teenagers into a high school gym and I give all of them $50 and I bring in food and water and there's bathrooms and games to play and whatever, and we let them live in this little test society for 2 weeks. At the end of that 2 weeks, they will not all have $50 anymore. There will be an unequal distribution. If you started with everyone completely equal, everyone is roughly the same age, roughly the same skill level, same social notoriety, same relatively social peers. Everyone has the same amount of funds available. Everyone is in the same set of circumstances. This is an artificially flat social experiment. You will have an unequal outcome. On the flip side, if you take a group of people, any group of people in society, grab 200 people at random from all walks of society, all ages, all levels of health and energy and intellect, and you take all of them and you take all of their money and divide it by 200 and give it all equal to them, that is equality of outcome. You have unequal opportunity, unequal at the beginning, and you force them to be equal at the end. And that's one of the reasons why equality of outcome is so deadly. The more common term is equity, but it means equality of outcome, generally speaking. So the challenge is the only way to create equity in society is through force. It's through violence. Because the simple truth of it is, if you take those high school kids and you want them to have the same amount of money after 2 weeks, the only way to do that is to periodically go in and redistribute the money that is dispersed and make it equal again. That's the only way to do it, is to physically take it away from everybody and reset back to equal. And it won't stay there. It's hopeless. I have a few minutes left on my drive. I've got to run another errand for my wife. So when I pull off to go do that, I'll see if there's anyone watching. I doubt it. I'm just getting started. But I'm trying to teach myself how to do this. I went off on a tangent there. Apologies. Well, more or less. But there were a couple other topics that were on my mind, it being Friday, and trying to do a little bit more of a grab bag. So if I recall, I also wanted to discuss parenting and gun rights, because, that lines up with everything else we've been talking about. So I have 4 kids. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. Boy, girl, boy, girl. The oldest is 11. The youngest is 5. And I just wanted to lay that out because my interactions with them inform a lot of how I see the world right now. We turn our lives upside down to try and figure out what school to put them into and how to get them into that school. We do everything we can to try and make sure that they have adequate housing, that they have food and clean clothes, that they learn how to brush their teeth, all these simple things. And it's amazing to me that I find it so easy to just take on that, to just absorb that effort into my daily routine. And every once in a while I step outside of that and I realize this is a temporary thing. This isn't forever. And I honestly, it's a little nerve-wracking to think, in just a few years, they're all done and gone. And then I have to look at what I'm doing in life and realize I have these big chunks of my life that are now open. I'm living in a place that I chose probably because of my children. I'm doing a job that I did to support my children. I'm married to a woman that I chose to start a family with. Am I still friends with her now that the kids are out of the mix? Do I still love the work that I do? Or would I want to be somewhere different? I don't know. But as we go along and continue these conversations, this is something that is on my mind. So I'm always open to input and comments. The last thing is gun rights. For me, as I attempt to look at the world critically, and I attempt to remain independent. Those are the 2 core values of this channel. Arguably, gun rights are the most effective tool at accomplishing those 2 aims. And here's what I mean by that. People get themselves worked up by labels, inflammatory terminology, or even just technical terminology. If I say the term AR-15 lower, most people don't know what I'm talking about. But if you know what you're talking about, you would realize that that is one of many components of an AR-15 rifle. And that is the only component of an AR-15 rifle that is registered with a serial number, meaning that is the only one that is federally controlled for its distribution and ownership. So you say gun, and I say, okay, well, this gun has 25 pieces. Which of those pieces is a gun? And legislatively, what they've come to as a conclusion on that is to say this piece, the lower, often, although different guns have different designs, the principle remains the same. So the reason why I say all that is to say it's really easy to get lost in either inflammatory language, look at these children that were murdered by this crazy person. If you don't want to ban guns, it's because you don't care about these lost lives. It's an example of an inflammatory argument. Or technical, where the assault weapons ban in the 90s, 1994 to 2004, President Biden likes to brag about it. One of the rules I'm setting for myself in this channel is that I refer to all presidents by their title and their last name so that I treat them all equally regardless of whatever partisan loyalty there may be there. To me, it's just a measure of respect. So, President Biden likes to brag about that, how he passed the assault weapons ban. There's a couple problems with that. One, if you look at it from a certain point of view, it accomplished nothing because it basically said, we don't really know legislatively what an assault weapon is. It's not really a well-defined term. And so we're going to make up our own definition. And we're going to say that the definition is it has a certain number of components that meet a certain number of these features. Scary black rifles with bipods and folding stocks and who knows what else, suppressors, you name it. When the simple fact is a hunting rifle packs more of a punch than an AR-15. But the AR-15 is scary. And so the legislation targets the quote-unquote scary. And on a technical distinction, you can say that's silly, that's ludicrous, that accomplishes nothing. Another layer of reason why it's silly and accomplishes nothing is that maybe 1% of all gun deaths in a given year are from rifles of all kinds. Almost exclusively, gun deaths in America are caused by pistols. It's not even close. In fact, in certain years, more people die from fists and feet than from rifles of all kinds. So if you're drawing a technical distinction by saying let's make American society safer by restricting dangerous tools, and you decide to ban assault weapons, you can have a technical conversation about how that's just utterly ridiculous and foolish. It accomplishes generally nothing. There's very little movement on this topic. People are intractable on both sides. So for myself, what I've done is taken to reframing the conversation to be more fundamental and hopefully more effective. Here's what I mean by that. If I were to phrase it, I would say that the Second Amendment's purpose is to guarantee an individual's right of effective self-protection. Effective protection of your own body and those whom you care for. Now, what I mean by that is to say that the world is a dangerous place. Everybody knows that. The founders contemplated that. And there are a variety of dangers that we have to protect ourselves from. In frontier life, you have to deal with wild animals that might trample you. You might have to deal with things that eat your crops. You might have to deal with brigands and robbers and rebellions and all that stuff. And we live in a modern society where we outsource a lot of that worry to the Forest Service and to animal control and to the police department. And so we kind of feel like, well, I don't really need to know how to deal with a bear. I just get in my car and I make a call and someone else comes and deals with it. So we kind of trick ourselves into saying, well, maybe I don't need these tools. But the simple truth of it is, there will always be one danger to human life. And if you look at the 20th century, one of the deadliest dangers in existence, which is an expansive universalist government that seeks to enforce equality of outcome through violence. Dictatorships, police states, communism, throw all the labels you want on it. That is dangerous, and it always will be. And the more you aggregate power to the state, the more you give for the federal government in this country and for central governments in other countries, the more you give for them to do, the more you cede your personal power to them, the more you delegate to them, the less independent you are, and the more in danger you are. So, for myself, when it comes to gun control, it's pretty simple. If you are trying to take away my right as a law-abiding citizen of effective self-protection, you're in the wrong. I can't go there with you. There isn't a single One of my wife and I, one of our favorite movies is the original Pirates of the Caribbean. And we like to quote it from time to time. And in this, it's perfectly apropos. Reason's got nothing to do with it. Um, it's a fundamental truth that I need to be able to be secure in my own person. Because if I'm not, then you can control my speech, you can control my actions, you can control my engagements in the marketplace. You can take my children from me, you can take my personal liberty away, you can put me in a prison, you can make a political or a prisoner of me or some other kind. I can be disappeared, I can be sent to a gulag. These are all things that have actually happened in the last 100 years. I'm not throwing out fantasy, I'm not throwing out fiction. So, these things are, this is fundamental to everything else. You cannot have a civil society. You cannot have a society that operates through the free exchange of ideas, goods, and services, which is what I call a civil society. You cannot have an ordered, organized, fruitful, engaging collection of human effort if you rob people of their right to effectively protect themselves by whatever tool is most pertinent to that goal. Most of the time, that's a gun. It's not always. The gun is beside the point. The gun is a corollary. It's a visual representation that right now, that is the most effective way for an individual to protect their own bodily autonomy in this dangerous world. So, hopefully that was an interesting, fruitful conversation. Hopefully that gave you some things to think about. I'd love a comment, like it if you like, subscribe if you like. I'm just trying to see where this goes. My publishing schedule is as follows. I publish a video to Rumble every weekday morning on my drive-in. I do these drive-home live streams Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm doing it this way. I know it's relatively low production quality. I know that it is not optimal. I know that this face is not the most beautiful face you've ever met. But this is what's available to me right now. This is pretty much the only place where I have room on my schedule. Like I said, 4 kids, a couple of jobs. We stay pretty busy. So this is what I've got. So this is what I'll give. So expect new videos Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in the mornings, and live streams Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I will upload those live streams over to Rumble, and I'll cross promote between a couple of different platforms, but that's effectively the publishing schedule. So we'll sort that out. Anyway, appreciate your time. Hope you have a lovely day.